It's amazing when we're really angry and frustrated at someone how we can end up taking it out on ourselves, feeling that somehow or other we're getting even with the other person. And I had a male client once who came to see me who was beside himself with anger and rage. And in fact, he looked enraged as he came through my front door. And it was almost as though his head was tilted to one side and his hair was standing on end, and it looked like he was just completely wired. And when he came and sat down and talked to me about what had been going on, he explained that he'd had huge amounts of treatment that his work had organised for him, including electroshock therapy treatment. And he'd also spent some time in a couple of rehabilitation centres to try and help him overcome his anger. And yet none of these had worked. And as I started chatting with him, it became very clear that he was very angry with his employers because they'd promoted other people, but not him. And he'd begun to wonder what it was that was wrong with him. But rather than looking to himself, he kept looking at his employers, thinking that it was them that was being unfair. And he allowed the whole thing to fester within him. And he got angrier and more resentful, to the point that he started making himself ill. And in fact, what was happening was that the iller he was getting, the more his employers were trying to help him. So they ended up spending the very best part of £30,000 on help from all sorts of different avenues. But none of it was working. But when he came to have the session with me, what we realised was that it was he that was causing it all, because the only way that he felt that he could get even with his employer was to start kicking them where it hurt, in the wallet. So he'd been using the money that they'd been spending on him as a way of getting even with them. And I pointed out to him that in fact it was he that was making himself ill. That how would he start to react to someone who came to him, maybe even with a knife, and started threatening him? How would he react? And he said, well, I'd stand up for myself, of course. I'll have a swipe back at them. And I said, but it's you that's doing it to you. Why are you doing this to yourself? And suddenly he just looked at me and went dead quiet and said, I've never seen it like that before. You're right, it's me that's been doing this all along. And very quickly I took him through the PEAR process, not only to forgive his employers and to let go of all the resentment he felt towards all of his colleagues, but also to forgive himself for making himself so ill and so unhappy. And the great news was I heard about a year later that he decided to hand his notice in and to set up in business for himself, and he now has his own building company in which he's enjoying success, but even more importantly, he's really enjoying the freedom that that job gives him, because now he's in control of his own destiny.